morning, you'll get out of line. You promised me that from.
But I got him on the.
Yeah, exactly. You got that. Yeah.
Sticks.
No problem. It's a big
area. 140 points per mile.
Here's what I'm doing. Here's your promise.
Three.
I got physical. You have a way of keeping people involved in Detroit.
Something like that. Looks like a city undergoing a lot of reload action.
Dan Gilbert's put like 20 buildings downtown.
I want it to be a time.
Yeah.
20 buildings. 20 skyscrapers. Wow. And because you got buildings, all of them most of the people who were lived here prior to that, or whatever, and moved out to the suburbs. You know what I'm saying? As the population dropped, these buildings were just big empty shells.
Yeah.
Populations were out in the suburbs too.
Well, they moved down as well.
So you know, you have actually cities with skyscrapers in the middle of nowhere. That's still been downtown.
Yeah,
right now we came in like, I'll take that one.
I've also got my president.
It was like 22 buildings last count.
60%.
And they're all.
There's obviously got an idea.
He said he owns the Cavaliers and so he's got
Fairly smart.
and they call him the Cavalier because he owns the Detroit. He said, far away from the city's development.
You'll see them later.
That is me. I was getting up in the middle of the night. I was like, trading. Oh my God, I'm trading.
It's really
right home out.
Yeah, but you're not the first one to say that. Slowly, quality just building up.
yeah, you can send it here.
It's so
You'll be back to the first world problem. It's like, oh, well, I'm so sorry. It's so well picked. Prices have gone up.
Yeah, that's what it is now. $500 15 years ago. Now it's going to be
Another run.
$1,500.
That's always all gone.
It's nice to see.
That's okay.
Born in Detroit, 1967. Detroit, quite a few different states.
Yeah. You've seen glory days as well. He was telling me that. And no one really gives a shit. So we don't really, we're going to a bar and speech up to a bar and I said, he said it's 87 wasn't black, it was Detroit. I looked around, the golfer is 100% white. And I can't get my head around it. But he just said, yeah, well, this is the different districts and areas. It feels very weird to me. It's not, I don't know, it's weird. So to me. I get it. America's complex with race. Yeah, it's like a big area. It's like apartheid, but unofficially.
It was organized, huge things going on, like keep the blacks over here. I mean, like every four when he built like 4 cement seeds on the Gilmore, he made that for all the black folks. Middle class blacks.
I guess back in what was it, the 20s or something, it was just the attitude of the day. So, for them that was cool. Now we look at it and go, what the hell? But it's a different era.
Yeah.
Folks came to a certain area and they continue. Just kind of like, oh, we are.
That's how the Chinese do it as well. They go to a city and they make a Chinatown.
Right. So they kind of just start moving and staying in Southwest Detroit. So most of the Southwest Detroit.
All right, let's do this.
Shut the door. What side am I going?
I'll go here.
All right, come on. You might want to test the sound out.
We're starting. Hello.
What's up?
Yeah, but getting their actual attention is another matter altogether, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh really? Have I got to stop right now?
Small crowd, small but meaningful.
That's fine. Doesn't matter, right? It's about what individuals do.
Right.
So
all we need to do is inspire one person in the crowd tonight to make a difference, and it was all worth it.
And you can do that from videos as well. You never
Exactly. Yeah, that's why we're live streaming tonight. So make sure to bring out your best questions. Anything you think the world should know, you should ask, and we should talk about it tonight. Because they're out there.
What do you want to shut the door beforehand?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll leave it open.
Let's shut the door.
It's up to you. You'll call
for
it.
the most part, like maybe leave it open a crack
Yeah.
so it's like open.
Enough so people can still come in, but
Yeah.
not noise.
Yeah, but to buffer out the noise. Thank you, Ingrid. Cool. Thanks for coming out, everyone. Are we streaming? Oh, okay, it's live. Cool. This is a chat with David Packham from EOS 42. He is a founder of a block producer that is actively producing blocks on the EOS mainnet. So the intention for tonight is to just have a conversation about what is it that block producers do, what are they talking about, what's important to them, what is EOS, it's a free form sort of event tonight where we can just talk about anything that's on your mind. But if you don't have things primed, I've got plenty of questions for David. So thank you for joining us here, David. He took the train in from Chicago. He's been based out of Chicago for, what, a week or so now?
Yep,
Just
two weeks so far, 2 more weeks to go.
Visiting the States,
Yep.
and we figured, hey, this is a great opportunity to bring him out to Detroit and talk about some different perspectives around EOS and what's going on from a governance perspective and policy, and like what are block producers doing? What are some of your strategies? I know we were talking a lot about strategies earlier as a block producer, so it's really a open-ended discussion tonight around the job. Hey, what's up?
I was curious, will the recording of this session be available online?
Yep. What's your name, by the way?
Ray.
Ray? Cool. Nice to meet you. I'm Rob. The recording will be available on YouTube at EOS Detroit's YouTube channel, along with all of our other recordings, so you can check out all our past recordings and meetups there. But yep, you can definitely review, and everything's being live streamed, so people that you know, you can text them and be like, check this shit out, it's awesome. They can hop on too and join in. So, and Adam's manning the live stream, so anyone on the live stream that has questions, feel free to ask, and Adam can relay them to us as well. So without further ado, thanks for coming, David.
My pleasure.
And we can get started officially. Give David a small round of applause here.
I love a round of applause for doing nothing.
It's an official fireside chat.
I like that. I'll be careful not to burn myself.
So,
That's good.
Awesome. So I guess we'll just start with some personal questions. Like, how did you find EOS? What kind of put you on to EOS, and how did you learn about it?
So I don't know how most people got into any area of crypto, but most people, I find when you talk to them, they ended up going to conferences in different forms.
Yeah.
There's some sort of gathering of people at some point where their interest is sparked, and then that takes them down the rabbit hole in some different way. And mine was for EOS. I was going to an event in London last May, so we're looking at about 16 months ago now. And I went to an event where Ian Grigg was presenting the EOS white paper. They had just published it out the day before, and so it was a really unique moment looking back, because I just happened to be at the right event at the right time, where one of the Block One partners was there and was talking in depth right the way through the concept of what EOS was going to be, which was in effect a scalable, decentralized, enterprise-grade version of Ethereum with DPoS, as in delegated proof of stake, all of the underlying advantages and maybe arguably disadvantages of it, and taking it through that. So it was an incredible 45-minute presentation by him, because it gave me a grounding to blow my mind completely away from what I thought, which was I'm going to build an application on Ethereum, to wait a minute, this application has some serious limitations anyway, and I already knew that, to there may be something bigger coming further down the line. So it was one of those moments, you know, very often life-changing moments, they come about where you're least expecting them, and for me it was that day when I just turned up and thought, yeah, I'm going to go along to a crypto conference and see what I can find out, and sat through 3 hours of ICO pitches to something really meaningful that changed my life. Yeah.
Tuned in at the right time.
Yeah,
that's great.
But I guess with anything like this, it's what you do with a moment like that in your life that really defines it. So for me, I started off by listening to that, and then I parked it for another 2 months and thought, yeah, it sounds interesting, but I'm busy with the rest of my life. Mm-hmm. So I didn't do anything then for another 2 months subsequently before I even started to properly look into EOS.
What made it unique?
What made it unique?
A unique moment for you. What did you hear?
So what I heard from Ian Grigg was when he started talking through all of the flaws with regards to Ethereum, and when we got onto blockchain governance and dispute resolution. So I'd never even heard of the idea of being able to actually add in real-world protections into a decentralized economy. The idea, for example, that you and I have a dispute, and actually there was some capability for arbitration between you and I to actually be handled decentralized in an economy. Put it this way, he showed up the slides, I took photographs of them, and I thought, I have no idea how that could possibly ever work. But it was enough to spark the interest level in me to say that this is clearly taking it to a whole nother level. Whether it works or not, I'm not sure yet, I thought, but it was enough to spark my interest to file away EOS and think of all the things I saw that afternoon. It was by far the most interesting.
Did you have much knowledge of Ether at that point?
I had a lot of knowledge of Ethereum. Yeah, I'd been coding on the Ethereum platform for nearly a year prior to that. I'd been looking into ways of building out and building a team. So my background actually, I was a food retail entrepreneur for 5 years prior to that. And I have an 18-year career in finance in the City of London. So it's a bit of a diverse career, I suppose, when you look at it in that sense. It's two different aspects to my background. But because of that, I knew I wanted to set up another business. I knew I wanted it to be in the blockchain area. And Ethereum was the natural draw. I couldn't, unlike a lot of people who were getting excited by token prices around that period and by Bitcoin, I really wasn't interested in Bitcoin at all because I could see it was a single use case. So what I was really interested in was Ethereum as a platform to build out on. And so for me, I had a lot of knowledge of Ethereum at that point, and I had a lot of knowledge of its limitations. That was why, therefore, when Ian Griggs' presentation on the EOS project came about, it instantly sparked my interest. The fact that, I mean, even if you look at it from a scalability perspective, it instantly addresses some major concerns there. But around that period, I think some of the early disputes were starting to become apparent. I think actually the parity wallet hack happened about 2 months later, maybe 3 months later, where a lot of money was appropriated from a simple code error. And that sort of thing, it really became even more apparent why you needed to look at real world level protections to if we're ever to encourage meaningful numbers of people outside of this room and this crowd onto blockchain, we need to provide them with that comparable level of protection.
Have you currently found some flaws in EOS that you've been involved in for about 18 months?
Well, it depends what you mean by flaws, doesn't it? So flaws,
similar to...
I've seen nothing similar to Ethereum's level of inherent flaws. So Ethereum is, the Ethereum community are very aware of those inherent flaws around proof of work. It's suffering first mover advantage, in my view. It's not that it was designed badly, it was designed without the benefit of hindsight that EOS has been designed with. So they are very much looking as a community actively at ways to solve those different scaling issues and, in theory, dispute resolution issues, but they are struggling with the fact that it is an in-flight system and the community is not necessarily going to agree to a lot of those kind of changes in flight. So we're already seeing that with EOS now. Dan Larimer, the architect, the primary architect of EOS now, is proposing changes, and the community are not blindly saying yes, no problem, Dan. We're already having giant debates and saying not sure we actually want to do that or not. So in effect, that even at this early level is a reflection of what we're seeing with EOS as well, and we will see that increasingly going forwards.
Okay, so and if I'm taking over the question.
No, you're fine.
Ask away, don't worry. Yeah.
Keep it up.
I'll probably power them back so the audience on the line can hear it.
The process that you apparently know went with Ethereum and how it's evolved.
Mm-hmm.
The evolution process of Ethereum. How do you view it different, the process, not the details, that EOS is going through? Aren't they going through the same things that Ethereum did on their initial starts?
So in one sense, you're right. So the question was, are the process that we're going through now, EOS as a community, any different realistically to what Ethereum has gone through? I think a lot of it is down to the starting point and the inherent designs of the two systems. So proof of work moving across to proof of stake via Casper and potentially somehow shoeing in some sort of dispute resolution is very different from delegated proof of stake as a designed system with a constitution, with in theory an arbitration service that all gets ratified as an inherent part of its design.
Neither one of those are true.
Was that?
Neither one of
No,
those.
absolutely right. Yeah. So neither one of these are actually proven systems. we are very much, I think, within blockchain, within the experimental phase still. So every one of these different blockchains that we're seeing, and every one of these different varieties of EOS, you're seeing different configurations. And those configurations are important for us from an experimental point of view for understanding what works and what doesn't. We may find that different aspects of the scaled Ethereum work better than what we roll out with EOS. And we may adapt and therefore implement those if we are open-minded enough to make us as a community stronger and better. It may be, on the other hand, that it proves to be a far superior system that EOS implements as well. So you're right, it's an experimental implementation that's being put in place by both sides. Really, everybody's trying to learn lessons from one another at this stage, and this is why people keep drawing back to the internet of the early 90s from that point of view.
One of the interesting aspects of that whole sort of dichotomy between Ethereum and Dan's EOS sort of technology is the goals of the lead architect of Ethereum, Vitalik, is to create systems that entirely do not require any human intervention whatsoever. On the other hand, Dan is implementing a more pragmatic protocol that assumes that humans will need to intervene at some point in the system, but we should limit their ability to intervene to something well-defined. So that's kind of what we have here is maybe Vitalik Buterin, the lead designer of Ethereum, is a little bit more idealistic in his approach, and Dan's more pragmatic, in my opinion, of like, humans are going to have to intervene at some point. Let's just create those touch points in a well-defined manner and make sure that the humans can't totally co-opt the system for their own self-serving needs. So that's kind of how I've thought about it.
Have a specific initial marketplace they're looking at trying to...
You mean, so the question is, does EOS have a specific type of marketplace that they're looking to expand into? Is that what you're asking? Or?
Yeah.
So as it's designed, it is designed to be a decentralized operating system. So by that basis, it's designed to be a broad, all-encompassing, decentralized economic system that could, in theory, encompass any kind of platform. The reality is we're about to see with the Worbly EOS-based blockchain, which is financial services specific. So yeah, is that the EOS mainnet, such as it stands, will not necessarily be optimal for everything. So take Worbly as an example. The World Blockchain Initiative, I believe it's a US-based organization. Their entire aim is to build a financial services compliant for the real world version of EOS that other financial service platforms, be they banks, insurance companies and other things, can base themselves on, but interface fully back to the regulators in the real world in other countries. And the only way they can do that is having full control over the constitution and the rules underlying the governance process. So obviously we, with the mainnet, define our own rules. We are beyond that. We're in a different place. So you can see right there why financial services, as one example, doesn't necessarily lend itself too well to a completely decentralized mainnet. The mainnet probably will lend itself very well to anything else where you don't have that real world interface in quite the same way. What it's also going to have going forward is the huge economic gravity that comes from all the investment and the investment capital related to that, because there's a very strong interest for anybody with substantial holdings to reinvest back into that to make it a success. Whereas what you tend to see, wherever you see a divergence in ownership, is you're going to see a challenge. So Talos, which is another fork of the EOS blockchain, has that challenge where it's capped ownership, for example.
Yeah, and just to sort of level the field here, Worbly is a potential fork of the EOS.io reference implementation, just as Telos is, that David mentioned, and also the EOS mainnet. So already, basically what Block 1, which is the core developers of EOS, has released is a reference implementation of code, and then all of these different networks branch off of that. And so it can sort of fractal out into all these different flavors and sort of configurations and characteristics of what you can do with the EOS protocol, but branching out in their own divergent directions.
Yeah,
that's kind of interesting.
The thing that's been designed, and I think it's been articulated a few times by probably Brendan Bloomer amongst others, is that this is intended to be a future of multiple blockchains. We need to get away from this mentality of seeing one blockchain versus another. In fact, even this whole concept of EOS versus Ethereum is backward looking. It's really going to become a future of multiple blockchains with inter-blockchain communication, therefore continually communicating and trading within one another. So on one blockchain you may have a financial services organization that provides banking services to customers on the mainnet, right? That is one example of where that could happen. You may have a very good game on the Ethereum network, let's say not crypto because easy that stresses it out, but that is being played regularly by users directly via the EOS network. So we almost need to get beyond that, I think, and we need to start looking at it as a world and a future of multiple blockchains, multiple configurations. It may well be actually that when we get into that future, we see certain configurations clearly work far, far better than others, and it will become apparent. Oh, it's not even going to be that in the future. It's a bit like us looking back in the early 90s at the way people were interacting at the protocol level of the internet and messing around with that. We're going to get to a future where people aren't even aware they're using blockchains. There's going to be such a slick interface above it. No one's going to have an idea which blockchain they're interacting with. So I don't think the question for those on the live stream was whether or not people would ever get to a future where they would pick these different blockchains, and I'm just articulating my view that I think it will get to that point where we insert a whole level above this, and end users will not even be aware of the technical complexities. I mean, look at nor should they be, right? So a good example is opening a wallet, transferring money around right now, moving in and out of exchanges. It's arduous, it is very user unfriendly, there's risks associated with it, and particularly for blockchains without account recovery. And you look at that is not viable for a long-term future. That is merely, I think we're in an environment right now where you can see the developmental stage we're in. And I think that's good, because that should focus our minds on always looking back at the real world and saying we need to be not just as good as this, but better, for us to actually take it completely and get full adoption. So none of us can sit here and realistically expect full adoption until we get to that point, I think.
But the thing I'm still striving for is, what does it mean to have full adoption?
What does it mean to have full adoption?
Right, because you're going to be talking about governance and all that. What's that criteria? What is the end customer's criteria? Like in the financial, the SEC being key.
Well,
they have certain criteria.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But
what are their pain points?
No, not even that. So when you get to something like financial services, you see a direct, for me, dichotomy, a direct opposition between the interests of government, centralized government, and the people, actually. What you see at that point is centralized control has an interest in the existing system being the way it is, but the actual interest of the people, in particular with financial services and control of money supply, would be the opposite. I mean, if you look at historically, the people had control over money, not government, until about 400 years ago. It was just the norm for thousands of years. and it became a centralized thing that became controlled, and we became we became used to it. But actually, if you take the financial services sector in London where I've worked, right now you have hundreds of different banks all replicating the exact same front to back office architecture with different, they've got the same data set over and over and over again, and they have hundreds of thousands of people employed who spend their entire lives, literally their job is to sit there and try and reconcile data back and forth to make sure it agrees. So if you look at the future and you remove that in a single blockchain architecture, 200,000 jobs, as I was saying to Rob earlier, is the current estimate in the City of London, and probably the same, if not more, in New York, will be lost. White-collar jobs in financial services by moving banking onto blockchain. Now, the reason that will happen is because you no longer need to sit there reconciling data, and these people can do, frankly, something better. It'll almost be like the same level of disruption Detroit saw in the past as well. This kind of disruption is about to hit financial services in the same way. The impact of this, though, when you get beyond this, is that why do you even need banks anymore in the way that we know them? Why do you need to have centralized control over money anymore and centralized ownership of money? You get to a whole nother level of paradigm in question. That's going to be a moment for the people and the government to have a discussion about. So they can approve it at that point, up to a point where they say, yeah, we've made huge efficiency savings and fired 200,000 people in London. Brilliant. We're now making even more money right now, in the same way that we digitized telecom services, and at that point everyone said the telecom services are going to go out of business. No, they actually made more money from the moment we actually did that. When you get to this point instead where you say the banks no longer therefore need all these people, you need to have whole nother discussion about what is the purpose of banks, and do we need to reinvent and review how they need to be. And this is so, in answer to your question, it's a very complex discussion. It's not a simple one.
I think it's rather simple.
You think it's simple? Go on.
If we take a look at how major technologies are absorbed in society, vis-a-vis here in Michigan, the automobile.
Yep.
Equate the automobile to a blockchain. Brand new technology, doing stuff that's going to get away and eliminate a whole bunch of jobs that were the foundation of the economy. Okay? So looking at that and saying, hey, yeah, we understand it. We've been through it. Let's look at it. Let's not have a technical discussion on it, but trying to figure out where or how, what are the real requirements for this to work? And they're not technical.
No, they're not. So, well, they are. There is a technical element, and then for this to work, it's not trivial. But
I think your point is assume we solve all the technical challenges. What other challenges lie in our wake? To some extent.
The question is about what product is going to be the defining factor.
Well, partially, but also it's a mental thing, right? It's a cultural thing. It's, hey, are people in Western civilization, i.e. Detroiters, ready to make the leap to a different monetary system? Because that undermines everything we've been taught our whole life about money and the way it works, the way value transmission works. To me, that's a far greater leap than fixing the usability challenges.
Yeah, and that's the point I was trying to articulate. Yeah,
it's hey, like, we're totally going to turn your world upside down with this new technology. Are you ready?
And for government, the big problem there is that's a direct threat to centralized control.
Yeah.
So hence why my point was more that ends up becoming a discussion between the people and the government.
Yeah.
It has to reach that consensus.
Eventually. That's the civilized route, right?
Well,
that the people are holding their government to account, saying, hey, we want you to upgrade to this new technology because it allows us to hold you accountable. What's up, Jeff?
Is that at the root of the SEC being so concerned about Tether? Yes. Because Tether, with its stability, and all of the other coins, even including Bitcoin, with its instability, is more, I think, a more direct threat.
Yeah, so Tether's biggest single threat is actually
it's systemic because it, in theory, provides a huge means for tax evasion for the US government. So that's its biggest single reason why there's such an issue. If you and I can park in a stable asset in US dollars, ineffectively US dollars, it's a synthetic US dollar, in effect. I mean, that's what it is. They are printing US dollars with everything but the nice design on a piece of paper. Right, yeah, me too. I love the concept too. but the point is that is a direct inherent undermining threat to the centralized power and control of the Federal Reserve. So absolutely, I mean, if you look at it from that point of view, there are other concerns around whether or not it's a fully stable system, it's got long-term stability and so on, but yeah, I agree with you. I think that's probably why the US government is most concerned. If you look at other aspects around concerns around Bitcoin and the market we saw last year, the concerns there might be around the fact that it was such a volatile market. It was clearly a bubble forming. It's actually popped quite healthily in terms of what we're seeing now. This is good to see this. It hasn't been the kind of crash that maybe we would have feared. Instead, it's been a correction, and that's far better for long term than what we could have seen. But Tether is a whole other matter. It's a direct challenge to the US government, in my view.
Another thing with Tether, it's also totally closed system. It's not a collateralized peg, so there's actually there's a number of stablecoin projects that exist that are trying to create assets with the properties of a crypto asset like Bitcoin, i.e. you're not relying on a centralized party, but they're also stable.
Yeah, but
that's a holy grail in the cryptocurrency landscape and the blockchain landscape, because then we can actually move real business commerce to these systems without the fear of business margins being wiped out due to the volatility.
Of course, a challenge for Rob there, in one sense, is that is the Federal Reserve totally open and showing full backing for the money it's issuing on?
Oh no!
No. So when we look at it from that point of view, actually
Tether works.
Tether is merely replicating the trust-based system that we're all used to with money now, which is if people have faith in it, it has value.
It works.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
we moved off the gold standard and so on and so forth, but you're right. Yeah,
the point I'm getting at is I think there will actually be a stronger stablecoin released on a platform based on EOS technology. And this is something Dan's been talking about, which is a collateralized stablecoin that actually has value backing it underneath, but is still pegged to a stable unit of account. And that's something that we'll hopefully see soon over the next couple of years. But DAI, yeah, that's a good point, Noah. So Noah brings up the MakerDAO has a stable asset called DAI, which is another example of a collateralized asset that works to have stable value. The problem with DAI, problem with other incorporations of this in the past, the most notable being BitUSD, is liquidity. It's really hard to have millions or billions of dollars of these stable coins floating around. The system kind of breaks down over time. The incentive model breaks down, and we can't create the liquidity we need.
Hi, Rob. Okay.
How's it going?
About the kind of design, I did send you an email about the stable coin. What do you think about, actually backing something with a real resource? Because that's going to be our approach. Our approach is okay, as you touched on. How do you generate enough liquidity?
That's essentially what Tether is.
Yeah.
It's an asset. It's an IOU that's issued, and the Tether company is saying we have some assets in the bank backing that.
Yeah.
So trust us. So to me, any sort of approach that relies on a central custodian to back the IOU, it's a single point of failure.
Yeah. The difference is it's real resource. It's actually, let's say, it could be gold, it could be diamonds, it could be in a lot of cases, it could be oil as well. So that's our approach. We want to use real resources.
So actual commodities as opposed to U.S. dollars or some other fiat currency.
Like the Circle and the rest of them are doing.
Whose requirement is that?
And because
Who's asking for that?
Those either have to leave.
Good question. Yeah, so the question's who's asking for a crypto asset backed by real resources?
As well as a stability of value.
It seems to be a step.
Are you asking who's asking for a stable stability of value?
I'm sorry.
Are you asking who's asking for a stable stability of value?
Yes.
Everybody. Who's not asking for that?
We don't have it today.
Yeah, but exactly. So we are asking for it, right? Surely.
I don't hear that.
Oh, I am.
I hear.
I put my hand up now. Who else wants it, right? I mean,
Well, I think the problem now is because
Ask who doesn't.
yeah.
the market is so volatile
Right.
now that when everybody talks about cryptocurrency, all they care about is making money.
But I mean, that's
But I think that's the main
that
issue.
should be the goal we're trying to meet.
Right, but I mean that's the core issue of cryptocurrency. Everybody wants a high return of value, and nobody is talking about a stable
currency.
So what percentage of the population we have like more about space?
So resource-based currencies are a bridge to pure fiat currencies for folks who aren't ready to make that leap all the way into a.
To what we?
To leave it to a completely.
Well, don't forget, cryptocurrencies are meant to replicate the same transfer of value that the real world currencies are. That's all they're really there designed to do. They weren't designed to become a store of value in the way that we're seeing with Bitcoin. So, and its scarcity seems to be primarily, and maybe speculative pressure too, seem to be the two underlying reasons why. I mean, after all, if you've got a highly limited value or number of Bitcoin versus a steadily increasing number of USD, you should see the value increase inherently, right? That's just an inherent obvious trait that you should see versus one versus another, all other things being equal. But really, yeah, I mean, all currencies should be a relatively stable value.
Not today.
No, I'm not saying they're not, but
But the reality in the market, there's a lot of demand for stability. It's just, right now, crypto is just too volatile for people to look at that as a destination, especially, people that are looking at that long term. So we're saying, okay, if you could just touch on, on what would be an ideal, what's going to be the confluence, okay? What's going to be a confluence?
So I'll tell you
between crypto and then maybe a little bit of fiat somewhere, where we're going to have a chunk of the population looking at that as a destination for investment, directly or indirectly.
So I'll just give you some perspective. I mean, the way that the futures design of certain crypto economic systems, I think, is moving is towards dual coin systems, and dual coins are built in inherently to the design of applications, and on top of that you then have cryptocurrencies, which in theory will be a slightly different, more stable version of a transfer of value than we've seen currently. So what you will have is you'll have a security token for an application which enables it to list out and be an ownership stake, much like we see with shares, and realize the capital gains. Internal tokens will be stable, internally transferred only store of values. They could be anything from a valuation, they could be private data, they could be other things utilized for price determination, you name it, but they are internal tokens. So you have a securitized token, you have an internal token, and outside of that, in theory, you then have real cryptocurrencies, if you look at it from that point of view, which are relatively stable in value. They need to be highly liquid, in my view. If you look at one of the commonalities between mainstream currencies that we have now, they are highly liquid, and highly liquid markets are hard to game. They are hard to therefore manipulate, and they are hard to, in one sense, therefore push the price up or down. If you look at the supply of, say, Bitcoin, it's not very liquid. There's actually not very much in continual supply. In theory, therefore, its price is derived by most recent transactions. It's very easy, in theory, to push its price up and down, disproportionately high to actually reality. And we therefore probably need to move to a more liquid form of cryptocurrency that enables us to have that stability. I mean, I'm probably one of the few people in the room who actually earns now in tokens on an ongoing basis. So I earn in EOS on a monthly basis, my salary, and the amount it's worth, therefore, is what it translates back to in USD varies substantially. So I'm earning this month 10% less than I did last month on month, when I do the cash in. Well, it was tempting to hold on actually, but you know what I mean. I mean, that is the reality of it now. I'm earning in a very unstable currency that goes up and down, and further down on the line I might be laughing, but right now it's not that high. So I would love to therefore see a cryptocurrency with that level of stability, and EOS is not designed to be a cryptocurrency. It is a utility token. So I'm earning in a utility token, and its utility is down to the usage of the system ultimately. I mean, you're going to see in speculation as a big element of that, of course, at this stage, but further down the line it ought to be driven, its price, related to usage of bandwidth and CPU, which is linked to the token. And otherwise, in theory, RAM usage ought to have an impact on it too. But anyway, just some thoughts.
David's lucky. Here in the US, block producers can't pay anyone in tokens. But in the UK, they're able to actually disperse their payroll in tokens. But here it's illegal.
Are you saying that in the land of the free it's not as free as you thought?
Yeah,
exactly. Maybe. No.
Can you be more specific on what the law is?
What the law is? What in the
yours?
Oh, in the UK, in the US?
Yeah, sure. I can speak to that.
I can't pay somebody that does work for me.
So based on, so to answer your question, his question is what clarification on the law around paying people in cryptocurrency. If you're running a commercial business, it's actually, there's a FinCEN memorandum somewhere that talks about, essentially my understanding and my basis of these laws are based on how they've applied laws to Bitcoin miners. So if you're a miner and you're doing it personally as a personal venture, not a commercial venture, you can transact in the tokens. But if you're a commercial venture, you can't pay your operational costs using the Bitcoin itself. You have to convert it into US dollars first and then spend those tokens.
I know of no law that's that way, and I watch it.
It's not about laws, it's about regulations passed by
the common law by it's essentially something that's buried in a FinCEN document, and I'm happy to link that to you after the talk. I could be totally wrong too. I'd love to be proven wrong.
Basically the Wild West out there. Nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, all we can do is take what has been put out by regulatory agencies in the jurisdictions we exist in and try to make sense of them, even if they are somewhat nonsensical. And that's essentially what we're doing as block producers, trying to make sure.
One of the paradoxes of the US is that it's one of the great hubs of innovation in crypto, in the whole crypto area. I mean, you look at EOS; it's actually a US-derived chain of innovation. DPoS originated from this country in all but name, right? And yet, actually, most of the big American crypto entrepreneurs are abroad. They're abroad for a reason. Unfortunately, they've been driven abroad, and that's a sad situation for the US right now, in my view. Most of them are in London, so thanks. Yeah, it's a reality. I mean, you know, it's the reason the UK is less hostile to crypto right now is it can't afford to be as hostile to innovation right now. And we talked about this actually earlier over a beer, and the reality is Brexit is a contentious subject. It's been misreported in the mainstream media a lot, but what it has done is it's forced the UK to be less secure about its economic future and start to therefore be more open-minded, in my view, to other opportunities. It takes a position of insecurity to be really open-minded to things like this, and therefore when I went to see the FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, I said, look, I'm going to set up as a block producer on this EOS blockchain, and I fancy my chances of making high enough to place and yada yada yada. But because I'd interacted with them in the past in my previous profession, I went to see them multiple times to educate them on what EOS was and what we would be as a business, and there were multiple block producers potentially setting up. So I wanted them to be aware so they weren't hostile when they found out what the hell we were. And their answer was quite simple. We couldn't care less what you are. We're not interested in any of this. All we care about is ICOs and clamping down on those because we see them as a systemic risk. So I got a very different answer to what the block producers in the US got, which is we're actually more interested in kind of controlling what you're doing, and we see this as an inherent threat to us. It's more an interesting observation, I guess, and I hope for the sake of the US it does change that view and it starts to really see it as more as an opportunity as it should, because this is the most entrepreneurial place on the planet, and that is evident in the amount of innovation that's come in this sector from it. But right now, those entrepreneurs are then going abroad because they have to. They're in Asia, they're in Europe right now, and yeah, I hope that changes.
What's up?
Yeah, one question to David. Thanks for making time as well. Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
My question is, what's the future of EOS beyond utility? What's the future of
What EOS beyond the utility?
Yeah.
So I think
application.
EOS is, as a token, its sole purpose is designed to be a utility token. So if you look at it though, its valuation is going to be derived by economic activity. So this is why all the block producers are looking to produce things, be they applications, pull together groups, get people involved, move businesses onto the platform. All of it's designed, actually, if you think back to it, from the fact that I'm answerable to token holders on a daily basis to vote me in. If I screw that up, they are going to vote me out. Yeah. Rightly, like they're doing their job to vote me out. So therefore, adding value to the network is our single sole meaningful job beyond running the network securely and effectively and scaling it. So therefore, the future for the EOS token, in my view, is growing it out. And that will mean bringing businesses on. So as an example, we've launched an incubator fund. We are bringing certain businesses on, one of which we're trying to poach directly off the Ethereum network. I kind of won't mention what it is, but the aim of that is to bring economic activity and usage of the EOS token onto the network. Right now, the network is primarily being used in a test phase. It's being used for a variety of reasons. The example will be this thing happening on the 8th, where we're doing a stress test to try and get as high a number of transactions as possible. That's fine, and it's all nice to come up with a new number that's even higher and shows the potential of DPoS as a system for the blockchain. It doesn't really show underlying meat of economic activity. So my view is the future will be multiple large numbers of businesses moving and deploying onto that, and that will over time deploy the EOS token more and more. It will push demand up for it more and more. Probably then we end up in a scaling situation where we deploy multiple chains, but it's hard to tell.
That EOS 88 or 888 is at 4 a.m. If you have transaction load, if you have an EOS account, be sure, there's actually this great Space Invaders
If you want to spam, you go for it, right? That's what he's saying.
We're all trying to spam EOS at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
what time?
Tomorrow, 4 a.m.
I'm not getting up for that. Fine.
So have your scripts ready, and if you don't have a script ready, then go to the EOS Authority Space Invaders game, where you can use their autopilot mode to spam EOS. Hey, what's up?
So I have a question about cryptocurrency. We want to have a currency, not a speculation. Right now it's really a stock. Right?
Yeah.
It's not currency, called currency, but it's not currency. So let's say I have a store and I want to sell this chair, right? Right now, if I want to buy, or you want to buy the Bitcoin, we know the price of the chair because Bitcoin is exchanged to American or with Federal Reserve dollar, right? Mm-hmm. If we remove Federal Reserve dollar, how much this chair will cost in Bitcoin, Litecoin, Dash, how do we?
Well, we price it in Satoshis, right, in Bitcoin terms, and you stop worrying about conventional currency, and you say, I have no intention, and the only time really that conversion rate matters is if you're planning to cash it back into USD. If we get out of that whole mentality for a second, actually it doesn't matter. You get X number of Satoshis, the derivative sub number of Bitcoin, and that's it. You're happy with that number until you at some point convert to another currency. Think about it like this. Do you care about the conversion rate between USD and GBP, British pounds right now? Could you care less about it? No. You care when you actually want to go to the UK on a holiday and cash them in and make a transfer. Until that point, you couldn't care less. So if we think of it from that point of view, if you're asking the question in the real world back now, how do we handle the volatility issue? Well, you can ultimately set up websites where the whole point is they lock in a price. It would be called a forward price. I mean, forward price contracts happen at the time. So it will be a contract that simply agrees the transaction at that price and it locks it in.
I'm aware of that, but my question is, okay, so I'm buying it. I don't want to lock in the price because 10 minutes later my Litecoin is going to go up in price.
Well, then you're taking the risk, right? If you're happy with the risk of it going up and down, you're associating the risk. You take the risk or the loss.
So my question is, if you want, or if we want cryptocurrency to become actual currency,
oh yeah,
then this risk has to be eliminated.
Yes, yeah, no, completely right.
Yeah.
So the question is, yes, if we want widespread adoption, we need stability, and this goes back to stability coins. You're absolutely right. Yeah, ultimately, in the current form, my view is the same, that you cannot have highly volatile currencies where the valuation could be half what it is 6 months later, or 6 times what it is 6 months later. That's not really what currencies are intended for. They're meant to be a stable store of value. So that's absolutely right, and this kind of goes back to what Rob was saying about other cryptocurrencies coming out that are asset-backed. Because in theory, if you look at Tether, it is remarkably successful so far in staying bang on $1 US. And actually, what's the BitUSD, right?
Yeah, BitUSD.
So Dan Larimer's first blockchain has an exact equivalent. It's different though, isn't it? The whole way to calculate it. So you may know more than me on that.
BitUSD is the first. It's kind of like a contract for difference, if anyone's familiar with that. But essentially, what you do is someone takes a position that's speculating that the market's going to go in one way for the underlying asset, which is a bit share. Someone else takes another position. So someone wants leverage and another person wants stability, and they make a voluntary trade, and that creates the BitUSD. And the person who's on the short end of the trade, who's shorting the dollar and thinks the crypto market's going to go up, is the one who actually had put the collateral into a smart contract. So with BitUSD, it's a stable coin, but it has collateral in a smart contract, which is something we can't say about Tether. So the holy grail, and the thing that's really going to unleash cryptocurrency for the mainstream, I think, and do exactly what you're talking about, which is allow us to do real-world common sense transactions of small values in a crypto asset, is having some sort of crypto asset that doesn't trust a third-party custodian that's liquid enough to do global transactional volume. And we haven't seen that yet. So it remains to be solved. It's a problem an open challenge.
So, if I might, in that connection, I'd like to say blockchain rather than cryptocurrency, because maybe is there a better term to use than blockchain? And when we're talking about the utility of it, rather than everyone.
Oh, I'd say blockchain. Yeah, it's better than cryptocurrency. Yeah.
Yeah, cryptocurrency is a misnomer because it behaves more like stocks, as you said, than currencies at this point. And I prefer crypto assets or tokens, just to create a further differentiation away from the word currency.
Yeah. Sorry, you go ahead.
What's up?
Why do you think companies like Walmart are creating their own blockchain and not being supported by EOS or any other blockchain?
Well, think of it like this. If you think of it like this, Facebook could absolutely take a look at what was done with Steam and to go, right, well, we've got this brilliant software, EOS, and we'll utilize that, and we'll utilize EOS tokens within the Facebook environment. Why would you do that when you can create your own face token, right? And actually control it still? Because for all of it, ultimately you get back to centralized control it's just too tempting. I mean, it's very, very hard when any different group or individual is in complete total control of a group or an environment to give it up. And I think that's what we're going to see with all of these organizations on social media is a brilliant example. They're going to ultimately look at this and they're going to be too tempted to issue their own, because they don't really buy into the concepts of decentralization. They buy into the concepts of tokenization. Tokenization is the unlocking of value, and it's an unlocking of the capabilities to transfer value around within the ecosystem and enable it to be transferred around in an unforgeable way, like voucher points in the US on, you have your vouchers for different things, but like that. It's a digital version of that. Far too tempting, therefore, to reward your users and try and develop it out. I see it as very comparable to the digitization of telephone calls, where everyone thought that the telephone companies were going to be wiped out. That meant the end of telecom companies. Everyone's saying, oh well, now we're getting to this point, we're going to see the wiping out of social media companies. No, we're going to see them evolve, and they're going to make more money initially off this, because they're going to tokenize. And by tokenizing, they're going to end up making even more money than they currently do. Rather than just simply having to mess around going with crude advertising, they can move off that, say, look at us, we're the good guys, we're not selling your personal data anymore. What they're instead going to do is tokenize everything and reward you for using the network instead, in exactly the same way that Steam has shown the way. So they're not really going to be doing anything innovative, they're not going to be doing anything like that, but they are going to look like the good guys for a brief period of time. We're going to see the real innovation a stage beyond that, and it's harder to fully envisage where that will go. I think actually you've had your hand up longest, sorry.
Thanks, Ingrid.
Hey, thanks.
Appreciate it.
Cool. Oh, beer, even better. There we go. Now I'm happy. Carry on. Sorry, you. Main competitors in this space: EOS Detroit, EOS New York. Who else? I can list off a lot of block producers, but you're not talking about that, are you? Okay, so I don't see it as competitors. I see them as different configurations of the same thing. I think we should all be open-minded. Frankly, if we all come across a different blockchain community that has the right attributes and is doing things even better, we should all be open-minded about moving to it. I absolutely think that. I don't think we should see it as the them and us. I think those who are actually in this trying to achieve the same end goals, that there's a reason Vitalik was on the code base of EOS 2 weeks before launch, pointing out code errors and suggestions and things to enhance. He was doing that for a reason, not because, I mean, think about it, that's got to be the single biggest rival that's ever emerged for Ethereum, but he was doing it because he cares about the long-term end goal. Right? That's my view. Maybe you could, another argument is he's rich enough not to care. But I think it's so I don't really see it in quite that way. I don't see any of them as rivals. I mean, I've seen Zero Chain's a really interesting new one that's just appeared, and it's looking to decentralize cloud storage. It's got very high performance. Looks really interesting. Frankly, a scaled Ethereum looks to me very, very interesting if they can crack certain other underlying elements relating to governance. So, yeah, I don't know what you think.
Oh, my opinion of that is in line with David here. I think that the initial sort of token protocols, the core protocols we see, the blockchains themselves, are only the first mile, and what really matters is the applications we build on them. So because we can have, as we've seen, many parallel blockchains existing with different businesses targeting them and developing different applications on them, there's this huge richness in the market of like apps on some delegated proof of stake blockchain like Peer Plays that's super under the radar, no one really talks about it. Those apps can totally take, you know, $1 billion market. They just haven't been released yet. And same with BitShares, and same with Ethereum, and even Bitcoin. Even though Bitcoin has the least bleeding edge, new hot sort of features in it, like if someone builds a really solid business model on Bitcoin, they can take a market niche.
The great question to ask with blockchain in general is, what is the killer app on blockchain? And the only one that's been done so far is a form of value transfer. We'll call it currency, but it's got its flaws right now because we've discussed the volatility issue. Actually, we're all waiting now, in my view, for the next big, first real killer app on blockchain.
Agreed. Yeah, Steam was like the second closest.
Yeah, it's near.
It's got like what, maybe 100,000 to 200,000 users, which is nothing compared to the global population and the population of internet users. So we really have not seen a decentralized app go mainstream yet, in my opinion.
I think it's this guy.
What's up?
Okay, what, any predictions as a future of, cryptocurrency, and I'll start with myself, what the prediction, my prediction. My prediction is I look at it more like a car, where there are different companies that supply different parts, to a service. So it's going to be, it's going to be like different parts, that supports a bigger currency that challenges, the USD. At some point, there's going to be a convergence.
You mean moving to a centralized, a single currency that everyone can utilize?
If you're going to be if fiat is going to be out of the picture at some point, if that's a whole, the decentralized, nature of, crypto and whatnot, fiat is supposed to be kind of like, in a way, replaced in a lot of instances, and a full adoption of cryptocurrency will help, it grow. Because right now, what we're struggling with, blockchain, crypto, whatever it is, it's people, the average person is finding it really hard to relate to a use case.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's not easy to use.
Yeah.
No. It's totally. Right now, we're very much in early adopter mode still, even though.
Your predictions on the future of this thing.
Okay, so I think it's going to go the other way. No, I think divergence is the way it's going to go. So I think instead, we're already starting to see it. Instead of us diverging towards one single currency like Bitcoin as the sole means of transfer, I think you'll have a seamless interface between them, and I think every single company out there will have its own token, and it will use it as a means of internal trade and transfer. I think it will have its own valuation, therefore, which is inherent within it. But actually, it will be a seamless conversion rate between. You won't even see it. You'll just be aware of the fact that you've got these things. They can move between other ones. You won't have that horrible worry of it. But ultimately, it will be therefore a transfer rate between all of those. Then you get to another question, which is, what is the definition of money as we saw it? Because after all, if I can sit here with a utility token and live off it, and it's not a currency, EOS, it's not a currency, right? That's not defined to be a currency, and I'm living off it, I can pay the bills off it, then we're in a whole new paradigm about what money really is.
If you look at the evolution of money itself, at some point, gold was cowries,
that was the definition, the single definition was money.
Gold. Way used for exchanges. Gold was at some point a currency at some point, and then it kind of evolved. Let's say in the 30s now, back in like dollar, and then we're looking at the evolution. It's not going to be this way, forever. Utility or not, it has to be. It's going to evolve into something. So what's going to be the kind of like Joe's prediction on what's
Well, that's a big question, isn't it? The digitization of money is a huge thing. It's never been done before until recently.
Are not involved, if you don't have any currency, crypto, or whatever, in whatever form, that you don't have over 150 countries adopting and saying, okay, hey, we're on board. It's not. The reality is,
you don't need the countries are secretly involved, though. I mean, there's a reason all of you showed up today to talk about fake internet money. Seriously, like we're talking about a giant R&D lab. Who gets together in a room full of 40 people and talks about R&D for fun after work, right? Like some people do, okay, but I think that this industry's captured all of our imaginations. It is what we make of it. I think we can create new value accounting systems that are local and that are closed loops within a local economy. That'll be like what David was talking about. Like, we've got an asset for this very niche localized thing, but it will be seamlessly integrated with thousands or hundreds of thousands of other assets around the world of a similar nature. And those accounting systems will capture and recycle value within themselves. So we can start to deploy pilot solutions today that start to experiment in this realm and to try to answer those questions. But They're fully open.
I mean, the biggest single change that I think we're going to see from an asset perspective, in my view, is the tokenization of real estate. When that fully comes in, if you think about why is real estate the price it is, you have to you look at the inherent things. It has a very stable store of locked value, but it also is highly illiquid. It's difficult to sell, and you can only buy and sell in chunks of one building. But if you can tokenize it, you end up adding the liquidity and the convenience of shares, and at that point its valuation will massively increase, which won't make it less affordable to people. It will merely make it will be an unlocking of its real true value, because we can finally trade real estate in a way that we've never been able to before. That's all coming, that's around the corner. So, you know, we've got an interesting future where new asset classes, or at least asset classes as we know them now, are going to be traded in ways we've never seen before. Yeah, of course.
That would seem to be that real estate would be like the holy grail of stable value for. Well,
logically, yes and no. I mean, it's, you know, real estate. Didn't you guys have a huge housing crash about 10 years ago?
Yeah, the US dollar, in my opinion, is basically.
This is why his generation don't buy into real estate, right? It's
real estate. We're basically based on real estate, the US dollar, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at real estate is it's a massively inefficient way to tie up money. You know, I remember I had to make a call when I set up my previous business, which is my wife wanted to nest build for kids, and so she wanted a house, and she said, right, we let's buy this. So we put half of everything we had into the house, and I put the other half into the business venture. Now the business venture failed, so thankfully her nest building instincts gave us some money when it all went horribly wrong. But you know, that's the reality of life, right? Now, you're laughing, but it's the reality of life, right? You know, always listen to a woman. Yeah, I know. She's liking that. But it is a horrible tie-up of money. I see it as vast amounts of money just tied up in this so we can live there. And if you think about it that from a different perspective, if we get away from the mentality of you could own a couple of chunks of the building over there, some here, different. You can imagine it like a portfolio of different types of buildings you can own. Could completely change the way you own real estate. You could own them in places all around the world. You get exposure to high risk but potentially high increase in value. Remember the gentrifications of area in Detroit, the valuations that have shot up. Yeah, think about that. So you could get exposure to neighborhoods that you think might be up and coming. Suddenly it's not feeling so stable, right? It could actually becomes a whole investment class that could increase by X amount, or in theory go down by X amount. You're right about the fact that it's asset backed. So asset backed tends to mean more stable. There is no such thing as truly stable. There is just relative versions of it. Gold is one example, but we've had gold crashes. We had a gold cycle that went up to $1,400 an ounce, and then it crashed down finally.
I mean, gold's not much difference than it was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, but well, you say that. Gold is exactly what it's always been, though. It goes through speculative bubbles. I think they've worked out it goes on something like a 23-year cycle is their best estimate on it. And, you know, in the UK, our idiot Chancellor in 1997 sold a huge amount of our gold supplies to buy into the euro, which is the European Union's currency. So we could hold a third of our assets in that. So we sold it in 97 just at the bottom of the market, and I think the estimate is we lost the UK around about $6 billion of money as a result of that decision. Shows you though, right? It's not what's
only
really
one
stable.
EOS market cap.
And really though, that's not the euro changing in value. That was gold changing in value relative to gold. Everything's relative, so it's tough. And so this whole concept of stable coins is really trying to find the best balance that we possibly can to enable us to have some degree of faith in the transfer of value when we can conduct it.
If you look at half of India, for instance, they use gold as a means of storing value. You know, protecting their their wealth and whatnot. You know, half of India, we're talking about a population of I don't know if it's 1 billion or 2 billion. So how do you convert about half of those?
Well, the way India has a cultural sort of link to gold too. You're right. So the rupee is obviously the inherent currency they have for transfer of value. They like to invest in gold as a sort of long-term investment they pass down between the generations.
Okay, the trust. That's where we're looking at.
It's the trust.
How does crypto blockchain, when are we going to get to that trust?
Oh, a long time down the line.
Where
and you can't roll out a new currency and expect trust.
About a country of 2 billion can say, okay, half of them are going to say, okay, I'm going to use crypto and store either token and tokenize in a way, either my asset, because we're moving towards everything being tokenized. Pretty much everything that we know, someone said is going to be tokenized. So how do we? Because one thing with crypto is I believe in kind of like the acceleration. There's certain things in that space that has to be figured out in terms of adoption and scalability. Because 5 years from now, like we're not going to be talking the same thing that we're talking about right now. People want to see like the real use case where they can look at that as an investment destination. So that's what I'm talking about, convergence and also...
It's hard to know, right? We're all going to speculate. I mean, it's like asking, if you think about where we are now in 2018, what was everyone doing 5 years ago, in the crypto world? What were they talking about? Ethereum hadn't been launched. It was just a totally different landscape. Mastercoin was the big thing. Yeah, you're right. So I think to some extent, you're right. It's really interesting to think about. I think we're going to never be able to do more than speculate in something as big as this. It's very tough to know.
Relevancy is if you can project certain things. There's certain things it requires you kind of looking at 5, 10, like 10 years. Possibly, I know there are a lot of brilliant people from Detroit, and outside. We can start thinking, okay, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, how is it? Even something. How is it going to look?
I agree with you. Really interesting. I don't know the answer to that, and I'm being as honest as I can.
Focus on a little bit as well.
Yeah.
The future of it, because the things that I read, people are. It's always it's about scalability, use case for a generality of the population, be it America, be it UK, be it globally. That's a problem. It might be doing good, like at a local level. But how do you scale it to a point that USD will be a second top?
We probably can't predict what that will look like.
Using like the Visa, it's quicker. It's like instead of walking,
how do I make
the car comes out, the car comes up. You want a car to that, or it's
how do I make an investment?
How do I make an investment?
Yeah, how do I take my money, sit on some resources and say, okay, I want to make an investment.
You can put into a smart contract. You can back.
No, an average person on the street can relate to that. He knows, we live in an age of goods and services. Okay, that's a chair. I want to buy a chair and all that. And if you look at the recent data, I think less than whatever % of the population are involved in the whole space. So most of the things
you want to know how we're going to get more people into the space.
Yeah, there has to be for it to succeed and have mass adoption. An average person on the street, when I walk on the street, just like if I show you $1 or whatever it is, off the bat, what $1 is. So I should be able to have a conversation with the average, American on the street about crypto, and he was like, yeah.
It's probably going to take a long time, but what we definitely need are more toys.
Yeah.
People need rings that are hardware wallets, so I can be like this. Come on, David. Bam! I just paid you. That's what people want. They want games and toys. So that's how we can capture their imagination. It's going to take decades and decades to build the trust.
Well, I mean,
what's up, Crypto Blood?
What's going on? I don't know if you guys know, maybe I missed it, I came in late, but the ETF for the CBOE was delayed today.
Okay. Didn't know that.
The prices fell back.
Everyone, the ETF was delayed. The CBOE, Bitcoin ETF?
Yeah, Bitcoin CBOE.
Exchange Traded Fund.
What's an ETF?
Chicago? Yeah, I know that. So you're talking about the Chicago Options Board?
Yeah. So
that's where I've come from, Chicago. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. What do you think about the financialization of these cryptocurrencies? How do you see that playing in?
Well, I think it's mainstream greed right now. Merely trying to get exposure to a highly volatile asset class. It's no interest whatsoever in the underlying philosophy that drove the creation of that.
So how do you see that? What is the outcome of that? Where do you see Wall Street with these
it kind of goes back to the analogy I was giving before about the digitization of voice and the telecom companies doing that as an excuse to then cut a load of staff and make more money. That's the sole driver, it's to make more money. Ultimately, they're doing what they do, which is to try and make more money. So it's going to have zero impact in terms of changing the world in a positive way, but it's not going to be an unhealthy thing because it's going to add more liquidity to the market.
It's going to affect the spot values of these cryptocurrencies.
Are you asking could they be manipulated more? Or in theory, yes. The reality is actually what it will do is it will keep the market more honest because the market players within it are more sophisticated, and what they will do is attempt to call out the people driving the market up and down who are less sophisticated, who are you and I, and they will simply therefore keep calling it back down towards the future price more quickly and make money off it. So what will end up happening is that the Bitcoin market should stabilize a lot more, and it will become more stable over time, probably in a gradual upward trend because of its scarcity, which is not an unhealthy thing. Again, part of the reason that we have very little fluctuations in fiat currencies is down to that same reason. We have sophisticated traders, we have global markets and high liquidity. So futures add a form of liquidity into that. So it should enable that stability to, at least to some extent, be injected. But don't mistake any of this for being believers in the underlying cause. They're doing it for
past
money.
Performance is not predictive of future.
It's like social media tokenizing, right? It's what I said before. They're doing it for self-interest, and no one should see that beyond that. And that's fine, right? What does anyone expect? Why wouldn't they do that? It's adopting innovation is the way I look at it. But the problem for them is that they're all going to find out that actually an innovation this big has the potential to completely disrupt them and take them out. It's like the taxi drivers. There's a service in the UK called Halo, and what Halo did is we had the equivalent of yellow cabs, which in London are black cabs. A closed market, only you could be a black cab if you did all the knowledge. You bought one of these black cabs. They charged much higher prices, but they had this brilliant service where you could use the Halo application, order your cab from anywhere, and it would curbside come and pick you up. Does this sound familiar so far? Yeah. So then they got absolutely screwed when a real disruptive application and use of this came in called Uber. And it wiped them out. I mean, it just wiped them out because suddenly Uber came in for half the price, and then Lyft came in, and you know the rest. So I'm sort of equating the same kind of disruption will further down the line happen. They're going to come in with this early application of it, thinking they're so clever, and someone will come in and truly do it properly, and then we'll see the real potential. It's just a view.
Back to EOS and governance.
Yeah, we haven't talked much about EOS, have we? We've been talking more generally about blockchain, actually. What's EOS? What does it stand for? What does it stand for?
EOS?
Yeah. No.
Operating system.
Ethereum on steroids.
Ethereum on steroids. Everyone's open society.
Yeah, this man said it. He knows.
You guys were talking about blockchains earlier.
Yeah.
Enterprise blockchains for finance.
What's that?
Sorry, you're gonna have to repeat that, Elias.
There we go.
It's lip balm.
Yeah,
all right, case closed.
It's a lip balm. Sorry, you were saying.
So, you talked about different blockchains for finance, games, whatever else. What, in terms of governance, what should the mainnet, what kind of governance should it have? Something safe or the Badlands?
Okay, so yeah.
Why do you guys think, and this is the question for both?
Okay. So I'll give you my perspective first, and then you see what you think. So what was confusing about the mainnet launch for me as a now BP is that I was fully bought into what I'd been socialized with throughout the community. Thomas Cox was a member of Block 1 at the time. He had been socializing a version of the Eos Constitution, the Eos Constitution singular, and it was being socialized across different means. People were giving feedback on it, and From that, we went with the understanding we have blockchain governance about to be implemented for the first time. It will be a constitution, a set of rules that can be defined as right or wrong that enables us to then apply arbitration as a service for the first time against it for decision making. All made perfect sense to me until Dan arrived. Dan took a look at it and went, well, this is not what I actually envisaged at all for blockchain governance, and I don't like it. So Dan tore the rule book up and has published a version 2 of the Constitution. And Dan's vision is that we move governance completely away from the protocol layer right there at the base up into the dApp layer. So that means that one dApp, Rob's got a social media app and I've got a legal app, and they've got completely different constitutions and sets of rules. And if you as a user sign up to Rob's dApp, you're signing up to a different set of rules than you are to mine, but then they can...
Same blockchain.
Yeah, same blockchain. But that's where it's all going to eventually layer and be up there. Now, when I kind of talked to Dan about this and tried to get more detail, it sounds like, you know, as with most things with Dan Larimer, he's thought about this in incredible detail. I mean, he started to outline it, and it was mind-blowing what he was talking about, but it felt like a lot of this could be years away. It could be that it requires substantial coding to support the underlying smart contracts that can deliver this, but he really wants as much of this to be in the smart contract level and to remove the human element as much as possible. So that's his vision. The other vision is the interim constitution we have in place, which is an existing constitution, and whereby a human arbitration service sorts most of these problems out. What do I think about that? Is that what you're asking?
No,
because it's very complex, yeah.
What do you guys, so you're foreseeing different blockchains in the future. Where should the mainnet sit? So
the mainnet sits where it sits. The mainnet is defined by virtue of launch now. I mean, it is the one with token holder, the token EOS. And it is the one that's recognized across all the exchanges. It has the economic gravity on it. That is the mainnet. I don't think there's any danger of that realistically changing. The question now that we have as a community is, do we adopt Constitution 1 or Constitution 2? Do we keep in place certain aspects of configuration, or do we adapt them or not? Now, I'm kind of hoping, in one sense, and I said this on a BP chat channel, I almost hope we kind of have both trialed out with full ownership by the token holders. Anybody who owns EOS tokens in one gets ownership in this other, and we almost try both and see which works best. Telos is almost a version of this too, in one sense, in that it's trying different configurations again. So I kind of like it because that aspect is healthy. We're going to find out what works and what doesn't by trying things out. Ethereum is about to try out some different configurations once it scales. We'll see if it works or if it doesn't. And from that, we'll probably learn over the next year or so, and we're going to learn a huge amount as a community globally, and I mean across multiple blockchains. That would be my preference. If I wonder which one's going to win out, no idea. My job as a block producer merely is to respect the decision of the community when they vote in a referendum and to implement that. And that really is, as far as I know, it sounds a bit politically correct, but it kind of is my job to simply say whatever the token holders decide, we'll fully honour.
Makes sense.
I think it was you first, then.
Well, I'm going to answer his question too.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry.
It's cool.
Yeah,
I'm just going to echo David here. Like, I think that the mainnet, to be totally honest, is Block One's show. They have $4 billion plus in capital, and they're going to deploy their apps there. And they're pulling the levers necessary to say, hey, we really strongly encourage block producers to adopt Constitution 2.0 because, by the way, we're going to start voting soon. And one of our criteria is that you support Constitution 2.0. And they have 10% of the EOS supply to vote with. So my opinion basically echoes that of David's, is in that, like, the way we play out these multiple parallel scenarios in governance is through multiple networks. They can have different brands and different token names, or they could even be totally endorsed by all the block producers on the mainnet, and they can be EOS 2. we haven't seen EOS 2 yet, which I think is what you were referring to, but we have seen Telos, and we have seen Warbly, and we have seen Wax, and we have seen Evolution. So there's obviously a number of networks that are willing to fork and try different governance. As far as personally how I feel about Constitution 2, I think that it's actually a good thing. At first, I was a little bummed out because I liked the ideology of the initial Constitution and saying nonviolence is important. That's that's the first article. You know, there's these subjective measures in the first Constitution that are actually really difficult to enforce in a decentralized system. So Constitution 2, in my opinion, is an acknowledgement of the fact that we should try to make the arbitration process as objective as possible, because it's really hard to enforce subjective measures like nonviolence and probably a number of other things like vote buying is even fairly subjective, which we started talking about a little bit earlier. But so to answer your question, I think Block 1 has, and Dan kind of have somewhat of a sage wisdom here in foreseeing that the subjectivity of the first Constitution is actually going to create a lot of problems for EOS, and so they're attempting to dial it into something very objective and very easy to enforce, which gets us away from the things that drew things like, or people like David and myself in even, which were that ethical nature of the initial Constitution that we were sold, and it feels like we're being pulled away from now. And we're being pulled away from for very very objective reasons.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, yeah. But also, like, that's not to say that I can't see the merit of Constitution 2.0, and there's a reason we support it.
Does actually, so I'm thinking out loud here, but the Constitution still almost kind of promotes multiple networks in the future, it seems like.
Well, the whole design of EOS is about multiple networks. They open sourced it, and they didn't really technically have to do that. Now, that was never going to stop, in theory, the code base being picked up, although they could have kept it private and they could have done whatever they wanted, but it is designed to be multiple different chains, multiple configurations. So really, I think we're seeing exactly what the designers always foresaw, because one of the things you start to realize about valuation is that you really are valueless without community. If you think about it, without this group of people here, if it's just me on my own, I'm worth far less than all of you being with me on some endeavor. And it's just basic, you start to think this through and think, well, yeah, community therefore is the valuing factor with these things. So that's why airdrops are becoming so popular. It's a way of trying to get buy-in from different communities onto a new project.
Yeah, and to those points, I mean, Dan's original project, BitShares, he released a reference implementation of BitShares 2.0 in 2015, which was released in the same manner as EOS, which was, hey, here's a totally open project of code that anyone can fork and use commercially. Here's the blockchain seed that you need to plant your own blockchain. Let the market decide. That's been Dan's whole thing. So rather than trying to lock it down with licensing and all of that, he's still doing that today with EOS. And that whole airdrop theory actually goes back to the BitShares project, in that BitShares was initially envisioned as a project that was an airdrop target, similar to what EOS has become today. And so EOS is kind of like the magnum opus of what Dan originally intended with BitShares, and it took him a few years to realize, which is create this airdrop target, create a highly decentralized token that's high profile, that is filled with or is owned by people who want to make a difference in the world, and then create that as a valuable airdrop target, so all of those people have stakes in all of these new projects that are trying new economic models. And the result of that is ideally a few things work and a few things don't, or most of them don't probably, but what we realize are the essential, you know, giblets of knowledge, the essential bits that really made it all worthwhile, that we can then learn from and build the version 4.0 on. So
who knows? Or we scale up EOS, right?
Yeah, I mean, ideally EOS is the last blockchain we need to launch in order to create a fair socioeconomic paradigm. But if that's not the case, maybe we can derive some knowledge from that and use that to seed the next wave. New waves, right?
Stepping stones to a better
Totally agreed.
Is EOS kind of like piggybacking Ethereum? They're waiting for like their scalability to go through to see what works and what doesn't work.
No. It's way beyond that.
They're totally parallel.
I know it's TPOS and proof of work with Ethereum has that child chain, whatever you want to call it, with the proof of stake. Now is EOS going to ever go to something like that where they'll have some multi-hybrid style blockchain?
That's a possibility, right?
Couldn't that be more secure?
There's nothing to stop a new protocol being invented that people decide that is compelling enough an opportunity that we should do a fork that implements the new protocol, right? And completely replaces DPoS. There's no reason why DPoS should, in theory, be the be-all and end-all, the best possible solution. Dan himself, I'm sure, would say the same thing. It's the best idea that's been invented to date. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the best ever. So logically, you're right.
Didn't Dan and Vitalik kind of have a different view of the Byzantium fault tolerance?
They do have a different view, yeah. And
I think EOS today isn't BFT.
Well, they claim it is.
Okay,
but
I don't know.
I mean, the claim has been that it's the first that is, but it's debatable, right?
Yeah. I mean, EOS has been designed to have inter-blockchain communication between different instances of EOS, but as far as like saying this is the end of the road, I definitely agree. Like, there's no way we can foresee that.
So it's kind of just going to be like adding all the good features that come out.
That's a good way to think of it.
Do you want to do a final Q&A on me as a block producer for these guys, or
yeah,
I don't know,
sure.
Whatever you want to do.
I had some questions about. First of all, what's your favorite DApp on the horizon for EOS?
Apart from my own.
No, you can talk about your own.
Well, the token leasing platform. Yeah,
okay.
The launch is in 2 weeks that we've been doing. It's an interesting one, actually, observing the best part about delegated proof of stake and the single 1% of rewards that are being distributed currently amongst all the different block producers is it has a highly competitive element amongst it, which is if you don't outperform everybody else, in theory, you're going to lose your entire paycheck on an ongoing basis. So it's got a brilliant driver behind the system to encourage people to reinvest back into the network. And so that's been certainly one of the drivers behind our earlier strategy, which is we were trying to define our strategy and what was our USP going to be. And we looked at token leasing. This is me speaking as EOS 42, us as a block producer. And so we decided that because nobody, and we confirmed that Block One weren't going to produce a token leasing platform, although now Dan's busy doing something anyway, we are 2 weeks away from launching the first token leasing platform for EOS. So it's kind of exciting. That obviously excites me most with self-interest. There's a range of other applications that have already come out that I think are awesome. So I love EOS Titan's voter wallet. Being able to actually assess and see how people are voting on the network fascinates me, because it shows where we may have some concerns as a community. When you see over centralization of voting, you may want to look at that and go, that bothers me. And as a community, if we're going to keep DPoS healthy, they have to be super engaged. So things like that interest me. You know, beyond that, the EOS Canada guys have come up with an interesting portal. We've got the referendum contract side of things that's going to enable us to all start shortly voting on different proposals. I know it sounds boring, but that's the kind of the big stuff. Yeah.
We can't even ratify the Eos Constitution until we have that.
No.
There's so many things that Eos can't do yet.
Baby Eos, right? That's what they say, baby Eos. It's still like finding its feet and you've got to hold it.
Yeah, the training wheels are still on, but once we have the referendum contract, things will be much different. What's up, man?
Do you see any possible killer apps coming anywhere? Do you see anything that excites you aside from your own?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few. It depends whether or not it's on a sidechain or not. So there's a couple that have announced that are fairly high profile. That one is that I mentioned before is Worbly, which is a financial services platform. Another is Ono, which is the social media network. And again, that looks interesting, although it's doing its own chain. It looks like an extension out to me that could be really, really interesting. Actually, you know, other than that, there's a credit reputation protocol that's going to be implemented for assessment of counterparties and deciding, can I trust you and do business with you? Sounds boring, right? Super important when you're doing business on a blockchain. You need to be able to look at this person and say, I don't know who you are, I can't see your face. Does someone tell me this person is worthy enough to do business with and put my money on the line or not? That's become one of the big challenges with blockchain. Outside of that, you know what? It's a tough one, isn't it? Because there's a lot of crap projects too. But this is the ICO market in general. There are unfortunately a lot of projects that I would say are not necessarily as good as they perhaps could be. So I've seen some that are good. I've seen some that are bad. I'm seeing a healthy diversity so far.
I have a question.
What's up, Phil?
I've heard that Everpedia, which is built on EOS, could potentially replace Wikipedia. How do you feel about that? Do you think that it's the end-all be-all for encyclopedias?
I think it's a clever idea because Everpedia as a platform, if you Google anything with Wiki after it to put it up, you'll see Everpedia directly listed beneath it already. And most of the time, if you actually look at the quality of the entry on Everpedia, it's better than Wikipedia already. But what they're looking to do with Everpedia with the IQ token is, unless I misunderstand it fundamentally, is tokenize and follow the Steam model. So they're going to reward you for quality of output, and quality will be defined by your peers reviewing what you've done. So poor quality output will damage your reputation and also mean you don't get rewarded. High quality output means you get rewarded. So if you review that and think about what that means versus Wikipedia, you are no longer relying on a workforce of unpaid volunteers. You are relying on a workforce of paid individuals who are incentivized to produce timely output, and the timeliness is another big aspect, to produce timely output based on the quality of their output. That ought to, in theory, wipe out Wikipedia long term because it's a far, far superior model, which is probably why the founders of Wikipedia came up with it. It makes sense, right? It's a natural evolution of Wikipedia to me.
I love models that are like Steam because it allows regular internet users to earn crypto. So like for me, I'm super bullish on IQ and Everpedia. Another one that's sort of Steam-like that's launching on EOS is Karma.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you know, regardless of whether or not they're trying to do some like Instagram type mobile app where you like take pictures of yourself doing good things and get tokens, whatever, like it's purpose driven, which is cool. And the fact of the matter is, that's the stuff that's going to draw in all our friends and family who aren't nerding out about this stuff because they can do something real and tangible and earn something real and tangible back. What's up?
Reverend David, as EOS, looking at potentially powering, the localized, cryptocurrencies, because we're trending towards every country is going to have its own cryptocurrency, kind of like what we have with currencies, you know, like the fiat currencies.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you? Have you looked at powering, let's say, another country's, you know, like cryptocurrency?
I think that'd be fantastic to be a part of a project that actually is replacing a fiat currency.
Because the bigger picture is when the whole world gets into it, every country gets into it. Every country is going to have its own cryptocurrency.
Probably, yeah. And
because if fiat is going to be like, you know, it's the way we're trending. There's going to be kind of like the, you know, USDC. That's the, you know, the crypto version of the.
Well,
the US.
I will let you in on a little secret that we're looking at figuring out how to airdrop on Detroit.
Okay.
We want to drop tokens on regions of people. Exactly what you're talking about.
Like countries, you know, like
that same thing. If we can solve it for a city, we can solve it for a country.
Detroit doesn't have a currency. That's the point. You know, it doesn't have.
But here's the thing. What you're talking about is a state-sanctioned operation, a country-specific cryptocurrency. Why would anyone who's subscribing to the ethos of cryptocurrency want to give the state the power again? What we would rather do is create
airdrops their country.
If you look at petrodollar,
sells it, they don't want it.
Yeah, if you look at petrodollar
vesting schedules. There's a lot of ways you can prevent
I
that.
want us to kind of just look outside the bubble a little bit. You know, outside the crypto bubble a little bit. The reality is, if you study how the finance is done globally, there's some realities you just got to, you know, you just got to deal with. That's the point. At this stage, probably, you know, like at school and all that, but at some point you have to deal with those realities. If I invest in whatever it is that I invest, you know, like, okay, this value is good. You know, we're talking about scalability in a global, you know, like level. So I'm looking at it. Shouldn't we, you know, like if every country is going to have its own cryptocurrency. Let's say petrol point, for instance. You know what that has generated for the country of, you know, Venezuela? Over $5 billion. $5 billion.
For now.
Yeah. So we're trending. We're gonna get there. Every country is gonna have its own version of whatever currency, fiat currency it uses now.
Maybe the model hasn't been proven yet.
Yeah. And the only way we're gonna be part of it, you know, the crypto world is gonna be part of it. Is to power those technology that delivers those services.
Not necessarily.
I disagree.
I think you're looking at it the wrong way in terms of the government's making money off of making it.
If a square is going to replace a circle, if a square is going to replace a circle in some functionality, you got to do a lot of work. You got to think. You got to outthink the fluidity of, you know, like having a circle, you know, as a wheel, and you are coming in as a square to replace a circular, you know, wheel.
So EOS is becoming the best technology for a government.
That's an initial prediction.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Shouldn't we be taking the next level of it is? Shouldn't we be thinking of EOS or, you know, the platform out there to power those economies?
So I'm more interested they're interested in the city. I'm more interested in my company, where, you know, what the states and nations do later. I think that's 20 years off, maybe.
No, it's not 20 years. You know, like if you look if you understand how the world economy works, it's a global.
Yeah, there's so much momentum though in the fiat currencies and that system. It's going to be much longer than that. But when we look at our own companies, is that one of EOS's targets? Are we wanting every company to have tokens, to have coins? I mean, or envisioning that, maybe not wanting is one way to say it. Would that be similar to right now? I've got a website.
I think the long-term vision is that every company's shares are migrated to a token. Yeah. Security tokens. What's up, Diana?
It's both. It's dual.
I heard you talk about baby Eos walking and about how you were looking at centralization and trying to see how that might be, you know, sort of squashed. And that made me think, and it always makes me think, things that complex over time potentially trend toward centralization. They lose the adoption, you know, they lose their buzz, people get disinvolved, and in a system that, like an encyclopedia that takes people verifying the information, you know, there's only so much that technology can do to verify the whole directionality of the technology. So I wondered how you thought about if you see trending long-term towards centralization that you have to kind of get in front of as an obstacle, or if, you know, I'm missing something in the way that the technology is set up that would, like, totally.
Good question. I think
EOS already be considered centralized?
I think maybe in coordination, but if you look at any existing cryptocurrency, they are also centralized in coordination. But to answer Diana's question, I think that you're totally right. The more complex any of these applications are, the less likely there are for more people partaking, because it creates barriers to entry. So the real recipe is to create things simple to use that a lot of people become a part of governing. And I don't know what it takes to do that. Hopefully things like eVeripedia will be easy enough to use that that effect will happen. But if it's really hard to be a part of and it's really hard to earn in, then it'll probably centralize and wither and die. But if it's easy to be a part of and it's easy to earn in, then it'll probably grow and prosper.
Guarantee that centralization would wither and die? Because I sign up for a bunch of blanket terms and conditions every day. I mean, I'm like just a regular user. I'm not digging into all of the, you know, and right now when I'm adopting an early technology, I'm going to dig in because it's interesting, it's new, it's novel, but later I might just sign in, and that just might mean that something gets a lot of users involved without really understanding where it's going and what's happening, creating a new, what we're up against.
A great example of that is Coinbase. You know, you sign up to Coinbase, you agree to terms and conditions to make it easy to use to get into crypto.
It's like
when you have no idea what a address is or where your money is actually going, you're just blanketly agreeing to have a cryptocurrency that you technically don't own. Coinbase owns, you just have access to it. And that's a great example of, I mean, you're having ease of use, like Coinbase or cryptocurrencies or blockchains, a complex system that not everybody's going to be able to use. And Coinbase was a huge adopter in the everyday person getting onboarded to cryptocurrency. And that actually drove a huge split in the community in terms of you have a decentralized system that Coinbase centralized again that is bringing in a mass of users, but then you're getting rid of the complexity of like what is crypto or what the blockchain actually is.
Yeah, to answer your question, if the centralizers, if the influence that owns the system, like say someone corners the market on IQ and they can just totally willy-nilly control the eVeripedia governance, the ability for that system to succeed will be proportional to their benevolence and their ability to govern it. So the more that we decentralize the governance and bring more people into the pie, the more robust the governance will be, I think, I posit. But there's always the potential that someone will corner the market and be a benevolent dictator.
Yeah, but the more we keep everything open source, the more likely it is that anybody can fork, take the code base, reassign the distribution, as Talos has done, right, and decide, and make it benevolent again. So actually, the key to this for me is open source. If we keep it open source, we can always do that.
Kind of like they forked away from their creator or whatever. Keep it open source, and it can be controlled by the community ultimately. Still, at any stage. And this goes back to the whole point. What defines the underlying value of tokens? Community underlying it.
The people. Then you gotta hype the people over.
Well, that's not difficult though.
Brilliant.
That's not difficult if it's a completely broken system where you can see it's centralized control. It wouldn't be very difficult to mobilize enough people across, and very, very quickly these things build on themselves. So I don't think it would be that difficult over time to do that. Maybe I'm wrong.
Over time, what amount of time?
Pretty quickly. Very quickly.
10, 20 years?
Well, I'm talking about a broken
If your favorite website shuts down tomorrow, but your favorite website 2.0 pops up, how long does it take
not even
you
about
to
the
move?
it's not even about the shutdown. It's the version of if you can see evidence of centralized censorship and you can see things that are wrong with that. It just takes a community to start mobilizing and educating others in the community as to why this is a fundamental problem. We're all moving on to this. Movements start very quickly, don't they? Right? We've seen this all around the world over
It
time.
always gather traction. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a challenge, but a step, definitely a really big step in the right direction.
Well, traction comes from a tool solving the problems that the people need solved.
Yeah.
It will just come naturally through the fact that these new technologies are going to solve a lot of the older issues.
Yeah, the other problem is still solving the problem just in a bit worse way that not many people can see, then they're not going to take the hike unless you have people who are saying, wake up, wake up. I think that's, it's
I
still
think
like,
based on the social consciousness though, when it's done right, most people aren't going to get into like blockchain because it's blockchain. They're going to get in because it's just easier for them in life, or it has a better incentive model.
Yeah.
In life.
You're right.
They're just going to go. When I first signed up for Facebook, when they first opened up their thing out of the colleges, people were like, oh, that's not good. MySpace has got this under control. And then there was Facebook. When I bought my first iPhone, everyone was like, all the companies, people, oh no, I need buttons, what was the company the government used? BlackBerry's got this under lock. And then overnight, everybody's got a touch screen, iPhone type phone. It's not the, you're not going to get everybody behind the social movement, but being early adopters, in my opinion, if we have the right infrastructure that's open source, truly decentralized, and separate the blockchain from the dApps being built on it, that's what needs to be open. And dApps can be centralized all day. We're never going to get rid of centralization for everything, but the foundation is built on. You might not want to, but the foundation you want it to be open, and that's what blockchain, that's what EOS is, or Ethereum, or Bitcoin.
For sure.
Foundation.
What's up, man?
Anything that has any platform or entity that has people answering one position or the other, by nature is not even decentralized. It's because there's someone overseeing something.
What's the point of decentralization, though? This is some
accessibility.
But
easy.
what I'm getting at is I think people focus too much on decentralization and less on why.
I think
if we can achieve the why that people are clamoring for decentralization and in a fairly decentralized way, then we've made a lot of ground.
Well, to me, decentralization is kind of like evolution. And this new technology, kind of like the internet, this blockchain technology, this lends itself very much to decentralization, to evolution, to invention, to all that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the fight is, and the governments have been freaking out. The banks and the governments are almost the same thing. They've been freaking out because there is this decentralization. There is a better way of doing things. I think there's a battle going on, and it's going to be going on for years to come, and we'll see what happens. And if we can prevent the next big thing from being a Facebook or a Google, by decentralization, by open source and everything like that, I think it's going to play out.
For sure, man. We've got one last question, so I'm going to ask you, David.
Oh, go on. This is the killer question, isn't it?
What do you recommend for anyone who wants to be a block producer? New teams out there that are like, I think we're capable of being a block producer. What would be your advice to them?
So I think any DPoS delegated proof of stake system needs to have a healthy influx of new block producers continually coming into it and setting up and challenging to earn the right to become a block producer. And to me, now that the network is launched, that ceases to be instantly you're in that top. It becomes a gradual evolution of building reputation and proving your worth to the network and to the token holders until you gradually work your way in. I remember talking to Luke Stokes about his path to becoming a Steam witness, and he actually entered as a Steam witness relatively late in the day by Steam standards, and he started off out at 90, 100 plus, and gradually worked his way up by virtue of the content he was continually producing and the value add he was therefore adding to the community. So I see that as my biggest single advice, which is that anybody who decides they wish to be a blob producer for the EOS mainnet needs to define their unique selling proposition. They need to understand their strategy. They need to understand how they're going to deliver on that. They need to build a very solid team, and they need to be aware that they're servicing a global community. This is not about servicing Detroit. This is not about servicing London. This is about servicing people from all around the world, and these people from all around the world may have a different perspective, they may have different needs, and everybody needs to be aware they need to communicate therefore with this global audience when they're deciding what they are necessarily going to do or don't do. Outside of that, it's obviously being highly technically competent. You can't just sit there and wing it with an Apple Mac Pro and run a node on the EOS mainnet, right? I mean, there's some serious technical capabilities required. Rob's going to get that because he's more from the technical side than me. Outside of that, though, the role of a blob producer on DPoS is interesting because it's not just techie. It's not the equivalent of being a miner on Bitcoin. It's far more diverse. Our problem is not once you're in that pay zone earning. It's actually how are you going to prove back to the EOS token holders you're earning and you're adding enough value. So you need to therefore have an eye on investment and building, and you need to be a combination of an investor and an engineer. Therefore, you need to be able to look at which projects you're going to support, be they incubators, be they investment, to actually bring them onto the platform and add value for EOS token holders. And you're also going to therefore need to look at which in-house expertise you need to build up to build software projects. So hence us with the token leasing platform. It's the culmination of nearly 6 months of work, and it's going to be our first big deliverable to the community. My guess is part of the reason we are where we are is because people they are adding this value. Well, now we're about to find out, right? It's crunch time for us. This needs to be good. Because if it isn't, then we will pay the price. And that is the entirely fair and brutal nature of DPoS, which is it continually judges you. You imagine what it would be like, the US government, if it was continually based on a perpetual election where you could just log in online and click unvote the moment you decided you disapproved of the government. You imagine that? Like, never mind every 4 to 5 years there's an election, it'd be, actually no, I don't like that, unvote. I'm going to vote for the other side, or I'm just going to unvote. It would be a fascinating change to politics. It would become more short-termist, so it would have its downsides, but it would also, of course, stop the way they play the people now, which is, election story and whatever. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I mean, the fascinating nature of DPoS, therefore, is this perpetual election. I've never seen anything like it. It's kind of genius in that you have to constantly think about serving the token holders. I work for them for a living now. They are, whoever owns EOS tokens, I work for you. That is DPoS.
They're our constituency, and we don't know them. If you're a token holder out there and you want to get in touch, we'd love to talk to you. Email ask@EOS Detroit. We'd love to talk to you.
Get the Detroit logo in there for you.
No, but seriously, it's really hard serving a constituency you don't know.
Yeah,
it's really hard. You have to guess what they want and hope that you're making the right decision.
Voting isn't too difficult. There's a lot of different portals and wallets, and they all provide voting capabilities. So if you hold EOS tokens, you register your private key, say, in the Grey Mass wallet. After that, you can vote in there, for example, securely.
Yeah.
Just click on the ones you like.
It's still not easy enough for everyday, non-technical, non-cryptocurrency people to do, but it's easy enough for the people probably in this room. And
but this is the thing,
idea.
It's way too challenging for
Yeah,
most
the
people.
idea is we're moving towards the usability we need to unlock this for everyday people. So it's just it's an afterthought on their phone. They're installing apps on their phone and they're using EOS.
The average Steam user doesn't vote for witnesses, right? The average EOS user will never vote for long-term for block producers. It is going to be for those most self-interested in the long-term well-being economics of the network, is my view. And so we kind of have to also bear that in mind. This is not a mechanism intended, I think. It's a governance mechanism, really, and a well-being mechanism. So, you know, if you own 10 EOS, you're not really going to care too much. But you own, 10 million.
Is it proportional to your stake?
It's directly proportional. So, 10 million 10 million tokens means you can cost. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's really a plutocracy at this point. Like it functions like a corporate governance structure. The more tokens you have, the more votes you have, and so.
Is there a cap?
No, there's no cap.
There is.
EOS.
Well, there is one cap. They've added a cap into the Constitution. No one can own more than 10%.
Yes.
That's actually true. But
there's a Ricardian contract
cap.
cap. There's not a protocol level cap, but that's enough because anyone who votes more than 10% is subject to arbitration.
But wasn't there was a voting cap before, wasn't there? I thought you could only.
Well, that is it's an ownership and voting cap combined.
That's 10% is the line.
Yeah.
If you go past it, you might be able to vote with more than 10% for a little while, but you'll be subject to a
The challenges
case.
I'm sort of already observing with some early arbitration cases relating to token holder fraud, where some people claim they've had their accounts phished and their private keys have been stolen. You kind of got to prove it in an arbitration case, right? So here's a good one, right? If you want to hide your ownership of 10%, it's not that difficult, really, to mask it amongst multiple accounts, be a little subtle about how you vote, maybe. So this is where we have another challenge as a community. This is where DPoS in general has a challenge, which is we need to work out how arbitration can be enforced. It's all well and good making rules. Rules are only actually rules if they're enforceable. Otherwise they're guidelines, and that's a big difference. So, this is all for us to find out in the future. This is part of the fun of the experiment we are just starting out on. And from this we will learn lessons, and from that we will implement changes, and either it will be within the EOS mainnet or it will be something else, 5 years down the line maybe, but we'll see how it all goes.
Yeah. And I guess, Haru, I give you a standing ovation.
But it's correct, EOS 42 was number 5 on 8.
I wish it was that high. I think it's like 8, isn't it?
I checked before this talk, it was 8.
Number 8.
In this 2
And-
hours, it has.
If we're up
EOS Detroit's number 91, so make sure to get out and vote.
Number 8.
Yeah.
What, very simply, since we're ending, I think is the reason that you've been so successful in garnering folks interested in
That British accent.
Yeah, it must be. actually, I'll tell you what. One of the key things is the diversity of our team. So there's me. I'm a Brit, obviously. Charles is South African. Liam is from China, although he lives in Canada. He's a student as well. Sean is from Korea. They are the core founding team of EOS 42. So we don't really have a home per se. We kind of are nominally London-based, I guess you could say, because Charles and I are from there. We are super diverse, and the diversity is our biggest single strength. We're trying to hire diverse on that basis, because I think it is one of the things. When you're servicing people from all around the world, you need to be able to communicate with them. Half the teams couldn't translate articles into Mandarin and Korean. We've got a Mandarin, speaker and a Korean speaker on our team. Big advantage when you think about it, month after month, publishing out whatever you're doing. So that maybe play to our advantages there. The other big one probably is Shintai. We early on decided to do a big project and say, we're going to put our stake in the sand, we're going to build this for you, the community. It's going to be a big value add. It's a big project. We're going to get on with it now in February. Half the block producers candidates didn't set up until April, May. And maybe the community's recognised all that extra effort, and that's kind of why it's shown through. Other than that, I have no idea. No idea. I honestly, that's why I'm not, you know, cocky about it, because they could taketh away as easy as they giveth, right? I mean, the token holders will do what they will do, and so most mornings I check the bloody table. It's like, you know, yeah, like fingers crossed. Are we still there? It literally is like that, and I bet you EOS New York, EOS Canada, who's top right now? Start EOS, they're Chinese BP, and I think even Start EOS probably at the top there will probably check with that same level of insecurity. No one really knows. But that's good. That insecurity means you don't get complacent.
They got 10 million padding there, so
is that right?
Pretty safe, yeah.
Yeah, you say that. One 10 million whale came in and voted for a load of people except us recently. So we moved down to where we are. So you never know.
Block 1's got 100 million sideline too.
Imagine that if they voted. Did vote for us.
So things will get really interesting when they start to vote.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone.